All right, today in this video, we're going to do a quick little recap on everything that is changing going into pre-patch because I'm sure some of you have questions. I want to cover what's kind of changing, what we can expect, and just talk about like what I would recommend for talent choices. And I might kind of glance at the WoWhead article as well because I think Sinzhu has a fairly good write-up over there as well. So I'm going to leave that link in the description if you'd like more of a written format. And again, big shout out to Sinzhu for taking the time to write it all. So really quick, things are going to get weird in pre-patch. We are going to be in a very weird kind of limbo state where I think the changes with some of the talent trees and the hero talents are kind of in preparation for the Apex talents being introduced in Midnight, but we of course don't have access to set Apex talents until we start leveling in the new expansion. So when you open up your talent page, you're going to notice as a Brewmaster a couple of little oddities. We have a new layout and some restructuring of our talent tree. And you're going to notice that there's even additional nodes in your hero talents as well. I'll get into these in just a second. Before we do that, let's just quickly talk about tier sets. Tier sets have been just simply removed, giving you a 6% and a 10% damage gain on your tier set instead of what we've had before, which was like Wisdom of the Wall for Shado-pan and Potential Energy and Harmonic Surge for Master of Harmony. Now, not all classes are like this, but Brewmaster has actually had some of our hero talent, or our, I guess, specifically the tier sets from Season 3, kind of baked into our talent tree. More notably, Master of Harmony. Shado-pan, not so much. So Shado-pan is the one that got reworked the most. So if you're someone who's playing Shado-pan mostly in Mythic Plus, you probably didn't play it too much in Raid. The new nodes, actually, let's quickly talk about Flurry Strike. So this was reworked. It is no longer going to be giving you stacks based on the damage you deal, but instead it is simply based on successful auto attacks. So every successful auto attack with a polearm or a stave will give you 2, crits give you 4. If you're dual wielding, auto attack gives you 1, crits give you 2, but you have a faster attack speed. Now you can high roll with dual wielding, giving you more Flurry Strike charges, but with a high roll, you can also low roll. Now, polearms are going to be consistent. They can't be missed or parried, and it'll, outside of maybe like obviously critical strikes, you will always be able to get consistent stacks for every time you Keck Smash. Now, as you'll notice, as I continue to auto attack here, my stacks are going to cap at 30. So that is the cap. You will never hit this in combat, and if you do, you're playing the class wrong or you AFK'd for a short period of time. Now, the new condition, instead of it being based around weapons of order or expending a set amount of energy, it's now just whenever you Keck Smash. So pros and cons, you're going to have a lot more reliable, consistent damage as a pro, but the con is that it is very overwhelming in terms of its VX. So you're going to see the Flurry Strikes here that's going to discharge all 30 of them, which is kind of insane. But then as we continue auto-attacking, you're going to get Flurry Strikes basically every time you Keck Smash. So you definitely want to make sure you're staying in melee, and you definitely want to be Keck Smashing often. Now, this effect might get really annoying for some people. I recommend checking your audio sound, your audio effects in game, just to make sure you're not getting these like Flurry Strikes blaring in your ears every time you hit Keck Smash. So pretty major shift in direction. Now, they did keep part of the tier set in the talent Stand Ready. Activating Invoke Nizao the Black Ox instantly grants 10 stacks of Flurry Strikes that trigger on your next attack at 70% effectiveness. This is where the kind of the problem is. So in order to play these, you obviously need to sacrifice some talent in here. You can't really sacrifice the start because you need the entire row available. I guess let me try to drop combat here first. So really it comes down to, are you prioritizing single target or AoE? Obviously you can't really just drop Pride of Pandaria because that requires the entire tree to get to against all odds. And so basically your options are, I have the opportunity to lose 4% main stat to get extra nature damage on your Flurry Strikes that does AoE splash damage. Or I can sacrifice Blackout Kick dealing additional crit damage for this as well. Now, if you want to keep moving down to get to Stand at the Ready, you're going to have to sacrifice Against All Odds or Efficient Training. Now, I personally think Efficient Training is going to be a little bit better, giving you more uptime on your Invoke Nizao. Obviously, losing 4% main stat is not super great, but if you really wanted to make like a really powerful cooldown window, you would maybe trade this instead for good AoE damage. Now, the capstone has also been reworked. You are no longer playing this like buff management game. They have gotten rid of that complexity. I'm going to probably do a big rant video at some point in the near future talking about everything that I hate about Brewmaster going into the War Within. But now, instead, your cow, whenever you summon your Black Ox, is just going to cause every Breath of Fire to also discharge some Flurry Strikes. So what that's going to look like is I will show you in a second. Now, good news is chances are we are going to be playing Breath of Fire again, and we are no longer going to be playing Rushing Jade Wind. And I think a lot of players are going to like that, especially those who were sad to see Rushing Jade Wind be the favorable choice over Breath of Fire this last year. But anyways, once we hit our cow, and we go to Keg Smash, we're going to discharge some Flurry Strikes, and then when we Breath of Fire, we're also going to discharge Flurry Strikes. And so the idea is that you're just going to be inside of this cooldown window, always discharging Flurry Strikes, especially when you're playing Sal Salabims. So you're incentivized to just kind of Keg Smash as often as you can, followed by a Breath of Fire. Exploding Keg also can well, not also, it does reset Keg Smash. So saving Exploding Keg for your Black Ox window will also give you additional uses. So all in all, pretty good. I guess this is probably the biggest decision making you're going to have to make is, do you want more power in your cooldown, or do you want more power into like your base kit where you can just play something like this where instead of like making your Black Ox super important, instead you're just like doing more consistent damage with like Blackout Kick, more consistent damage with Shadow over the Battlefield, getting more nature damage as well as Flurry Strikes. So some good options here. I don't know what the best play is going to be. I'm going to talk about that later when I kind of explore the WoWhead article from that Sinzhu wrote, but basically, there's some decision making here. Now, Master of Harmony, on the other hand, unfortunately has been kind of bricked. I did a video talking about this a little bit yesterday, or I guess yesterday at the time of recording this. Master of Harmony has also been reworked. They changed the capstone to no longer give you a 20% damage increase on mobs that are afflicted by your vitality. Instead, now you're going to be bolstering up your vitality dot, getting more damage from it. Also, Keg Smash no longer contributes to vitality gains, but instead it draws upon your vitality just applying the dot. So benefit is that it's no longer this like playstyle of like build up a bunch of damage and then use Celestial Brew to expel it onto your enemies. Instead, as you're in combat, you're just always going to be kind of applying this dot. So I'm going to Keg Smash here, and you're going to see that dot's going to just get applied. Now you are still pooling it up, and chances are you're probably going to get a bigger pool of vitality, especially in AoE, than you can actually expel just with Keg Smash. But then the other trade-off or the benefit is that you can always just hit Celestial Brew or Celestial Infusion, and you're always going to basically have the dot up. Now, I don't know if it's updating dynamically, which is one problem. So it's just kind of an issue. I am not a fan of this change. I think it's like a really poor change. Having a dot always applied that ends up being a pretty low portion of your damage. I mean, it's good, but it's not really that good. It's just not a great playstyle. Now, in order to get your tier set again, which is whenever you cast Celestial Brew or Celestial Infusion, you get those additional procs of damage on Harmonic Surge from your Tiger Palm. This is going to be kind of a weird talent to try to pick up. Now, you could drop the capstone, of course, so now Vitality will only ever be procced from actually hitting Celestial Brew, which could be a good thing. Also, Clarity of Purpose, you probably could also drop that to get potential energy, but then the issue you're going to run into here is that you're going to honestly probably hit really high stacks of these quite consistently. Now, I think Master of Harmony in its current state will feel better than it does in Midnight. So in Midnight, I think it's going to get objectively worse, but I think now with like something like more of a setup that looks like this, you might be in a slightly better spot. So now this time I'm actually going to be accumulating all of my vitality. And then when I hit Celestial Infusion here, that is when I'm going to start expunging this onto my foes. So which one you want to play is kind of up to you. I think Shado-pan ends up actually being a little bit more favorable. And I think that so far is actually looking like the case in Midnight as well. Unfortunately, Master of Harmony is just in a very, very bad spot. But there are some options you can take by dropping in this tree to lose a little bit of damage or lose a little bit of like healing just for that extra Harmonic Surge and potential energy buffs. The one change that they did make is that Vivify will now also expel your potential energy, which is good. So if you want to Tiger or Vivify, I guess, in your rotation, you could do that. Now, we also did lose a couple of buttons in our kit. So what you see on my action bar right now, outside of maybe things like Detox, Spinning Crane Kick, Vivify, this this is your kit. These are your action. This is your action bar setup. They have removed Rising Sun Kick, so you no longer have to worry about that in your rotation. That is going to have some issues down the road just because it was a button that actually allowed you to conserve energy for a global, which now, because we don't have that anymore, it feels like you're out of energy a little bit more. So it does feel a little clunky to play without the Apex talents, which again, I think I'm all for in Midnight when we have Apex talents, but right now it's like you're just kind of like energy starved a lot, which isn't super fun. So Rising Sun Kick is gone. We also no longer have Weapons of Order. So our major main cooldown is going to be Invoke Nizao, the Black Ox. So those two are gone. They've also removed things like Diffuse Magic and Dampen Harm. So our only major defensive cooldown now is going to be Fortifying Brew. Now I will say, yes, removing the cooldowns feels a little bad. You have less agency over your own health in that regard, but everything else does feel really good, and you get even more self-sustained through things like Vital Flame. So there is trade-offs to losing our defensives. We are gaining like passive absorbs through Yulan's Grace. Fortifying Brew is still not actually that terrible, and Vital Flame is going to lead into more healing through Celestial Fortune, Vital Flame, and of course, then you still have things like Gaiplant's Imperial Brew, putting in a lot of legwork. So Brewmaster is going to be a little bit more simple, but it is going to feel clunky. That is kind of my major takeaway from playing on the PTR, is that I don't know how fun it's going to be to like do some keys or to raid on, because the rotation feels like it's a little gutted right now because it was designed with Apex talents in mind. Now, the last thing I want to do is I want to quickly go over some recommended builds, and I'm going to be using Sinzhu's article as a reference. Again, I'll have it linked down below. Big props to Sinzhu for kind of putting this together. So check it out if you'd like to see. Now, I'm going to skip down basically to what the best Brewmaster talent build will be for the season 3 of the War Within. So he has Open World Delves, Mythic Plus, Standard, and then Raid Default. So let's quickly take a look at these. All right, so here is the updated builds for Shado-pan Raid Single Target, Shado-pan Raid Advance, and then we also have Master of Harmony Raid Single Target, and then Talent Choices Explained. And so the one thing you'll notice here is that in the standard build, for probably the majority of players, we are actually opting out for some reason of playing Chi Wave, which I think is, or sorry, Chi Burst, and opting in for Chi Wave. I think this is a little bit of an odd choice, mostly because the rotation feels a little dry, I would say, is the best way to put it. But like I mentioned earlier, we are dropping Vigilant Watch for that Shadow over the Battlefield. I think Shadow over the Battlefield ends up just dealing more damage over the course of a fight than critical strike damage on Blackout Kick, which again, critical strike, even if you are stacking it, even if you're bissed out, it's still not going to hold up to what Shadow over the Battlefield does. So this trade kind of makes sense to me. The one thing that I don't know if it will end up actually feeling good is just our energy conservation without things like Chi Burst, obviously with the removal of Rising Sun Kick. I feel like Chi Burst is just going to be good for the rotation, even though Chi Wave is equal in single target to Chi Burst, at least for current sims. So kind of an interesting choice. Now, one thing you'll notice as well that I forgot to mention is Vital Flame is not currently being played in this build, which actually makes sense. I've kind of forgot to mention that in the choice node. So Vital Flame is only really going to be good for like Mythic Plus, and it won't even matter because we're in pre-patch and Mythic Plus like just doesn't matter. But Vital Flame has really good scaling into larger pulls, especially like really, really, really big pulls. When you look at the Awakening Spirit, it's just going to mitigate a flat amount of damage, and it's just going to be better in single target encounters. So that is a good choice there. Generally speaking, if you find yourself running into issues where you're just energy starved and your rotation kind of falls over for a couple of seconds because you just don't know what to hit or don't have energy, I would say maybe swap to Chi Burst just to have something to hit and cast. But generally speaking, I agree with this. Now, when it comes to Shado-pan Mythic Plus, you're going to see that swap here to Chi Burst. Chi Burst is going to be doing more damage in AoE, so this does make sense. Bob and Weave with the change to 5 seconds increased on your stagger's duration. This actually becomes a stronger option defensively for tanks. Now, I do think Black Ox Brew still has merits if you want to be in control of just your overall like damage and healing profile. Being able to reset your brews, whether it's Purifying Brew, Celestial Brew, This actually ends up feeling a little bit better. But Bob and Weave is a great talent and has been performing really well. Now, one thing that is being recommended here that I do not absolutely recommend is Empty the Cellar. This is currently, and I don't know if this is going to be fixed when it goes live tomorrow, but as of right now, if I come into combat here and I drop an Exploding Keg, when you hit Exploding Keg again with Empty the Cellar, it's going to recast kegs at random targets, dealing damage and reducing your bruise cooldown by 3 seconds per keg thrown. Now, the issue is that it currently targets things that you're not in combat with. This is still a problem that we have been experiencing all through Midnight, Alpha, Beta, PTR. This is a bug that they just need to fix. Until they do that, I do not recommend playing with it. Do not play Empty the Cellar. But everything else in this tree does make sense. If you need a little bit more survivability, dropping one Walk with the Ox for something like Zen State could end up being good. I also think Heart of the Ox ends up actually being a fairly good capstone. Getting 5% increased mastery for your major cooldown window actually is a pretty massive damage gain, and it's going to bolster your Celestial Brew or Celestial Infusion in those. Another thing I want to mention is Celestial Infusion is still not working. When you hit Celestial Infusion, you have an absorption shield for 0% total. Celestial Infusion is currently not working. Right now, the absorb that you see on me actually ends up being my gift of, or Yulan's Grace. So I have Celestial Infusion active right now. The only absorb I have is actually coming from, like I said, Yulan's Grace. So this talent, until they fix it, it's going to be pretty trash. The way you can tell if it's still bugged, if you're on live servers, is hit the button and read the tooltip. Absorbs 30% of incoming damage up to a total of 0. That is just not working. So stay away from that. So just some things to keep in mind when we're taking a look at these kind of talent builds. I'm going to have my own talent build linked in my Discord, and maybe I'll link it in the description of this video as well, just so you guys can have access to it for Mythic Plus. The raid build, I don't care as much about, and talking about Empty the Cellar. Empty the Cellar is fine in raid if you're only hitting one target. There's no targets that you can possibly pull in a boss encounter space, so Empty the Cellar is going to be fine. Just in Mythic Plus, I would swap this for Heart of the Ox. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. I hope that makes sense. Brewmaster, I guess final thought is it's gonna feel weird. I don't like saying this because it sounds like weird coming from like a WoW centralized YouTuber, but like I would play a different game for a bit. I don't think Brewmaster is gonna feel all that great in pre-patch because again, like I said, we're in this like weird little limbo state between expansions. All the changes to our tree feel like they have Apex talents in mind. Apex talents aren't here yet. So it feels like the class is now going to be missing something instead of gaining anything. Anyways, let me know if you have any questions down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.